So welcome back guys, today we are going to see, what if Bella could see Henrik's ghost. So let's get started. My hands trembled as I pressed them against the gaping wound in my neck. I tried to talk to get my brother's attention as I could feel myself slipping away into the darkness. I tried to say the words, but they only got lost behind the blood pooling in my mouth that now began to trickle down my chin. Do not speak, he said as he glanced down at me for a moment. His voice trembled as he spoke, he seemed so worried. Was I going to die? As if hearing my thoughts, Nick spoke, looking down at me again. I'll get you back to Mother, and she'll heal you with magic. You're going to be alright. Although his words were meant to be helpful, I found no comfort in them. His voice was too fearful and broken, leading me to believe that he was lying to benefit me. Although it was meant to help, I felt nothing close to the feeling of hope. I was going to die at the hands of the wolves. I was going to die by the hands of the creatures I had admired so dearly. In the end, my curiosity was going to be the end of me. I screamed out as my brother set me down on the ground just outside of the catacombs where my family hid. The cut at my throat only worsening, the cut at my side was no better. My brother lifted my head onto his lap as he called out to my mother. My mother. Could she heal me? I looked down at my blood-stained clothes. No. She wouldn't be able to save me, but she would be able to say goodbye. I coughed again, feeling the warm trail of the blood as it trickled down my chin, soaking my shirt as it continued to drip. What happened, boy? The roaring voice of my father came, distracting me from my mother who had kneeled at my side. I couldn't hear what was being said. I could only focus on the slow darkness that began to swallow me. I could faintly feel my hand tingling from the magic of my mother as she tried to save me. As the darkness took over, I knew it was useless. There was no more life for me. Page break. I opened my eyes, looking around as I stood outside of the catacombs. I looked down at my hands, and the slight transparent look to them led me to believe that I was in fact dead. I had died young, barely a man at the age of 15. I stumbled as I walked, realizing that I could walk through these people, and they would never know. I continued to walk, wanting to end up back at my home. I looked around for any clue of what day it could have been, and indication of how long I had been dead. Was I already buried beneath the earth? Was my body put to rest already? I finally came to what I used to call my home. I reached for the door only to have my hand go through it. I looked down at my hand and moved it in and out of the door. I couldn't feel any of this. Not the door or the soft wind that I could hear blowing. It was all absent to me. I had no part in this world anymore. I walked through the door, passing through to the other side of the door, reaching the inside of my old home. My family was gathered, the look of mourning on their faces. I am here, I yelled, yet none of their heads turned to me. My mother was curled up to my sister's side, weeping as it looked she could barely hold herself together. My brothers were all gathered at the table, a drink in hand. They all looked horrible. I walked over to Nick, my brother, my closest friend. Had he cried for me when no one was looking? I know it would be useless, but I rested my hand on his shoulder, only to have it pass through him. I saw him shiver and reach for his shoulder, laying his hand over where I had touched him. It wasn't useless, as he had clearly felt some part of me. I moved and turned towards my father, my head tilted as he had his sword in hand as if ready for battle. Was he going to avenge my death? I watched him look to my mother, and the look in his eyes had me terrified. What was to come next wouldn't end well. I left the home. The was only so much I could take of this. I walked for what felt like hours. I never tired. It was a different sensation not to feel so tired and weak. I found a secluded area of the woods and dropped to my knees. I buried my head in my hands, and cried. I had died, my life was cut short. I would never get married, I would never have children, and I would never grow old. I would be trapped watching on as others lived, and I was stuck with the burden of watching alone in the darkness. Page break. It seemed like days had passed before I stood again. I walked back to my home, surprised to see the daylight disappear and the darkness take over. I watched as my brothers courted a girl. It seemed like moments ago they were mourning my death, and now it seemed as if I never existed. Was I so easy to forget? I felt something I had never felt before, a bubbling heat rising from my toes to the tips of my fingers. Blinding rage. That was what I felt towards the two I had called brothers. I kept moving, heading inside what used to be home. Rebecca was nowhere in sight, Finn wasn't to be seen as well. Cole was at Mother's side. I walked over to them and kneeled beside them as they were working on something magical. Something I didn't recognize. Cole and I were the only ones who had taken an interest in magic. I watched as Mother finished writing a list of things down, no doubt sending Cole to fetch the items for her. "What are these for, Mother?" Cole asked as he read the ingredients. "Are these to bring back, Henrik?" I looked at my mother, wanting to hear the answer she had. She took in a deep breath and I watched as a few tears escaped her eyes. "No, he cannot be brought back. This is for us. This is going to make us stronger. It's going to allow us to fight back against those demons of the moon. I won't let any of you die." I felt a pang in my chest and that blinding rage was back. I stood immediately, not being able to control it any longer. "You couldn't have thought of this sooner. I had to die for you to fight back. Why was my life so unimportant to you all?" I scoffed as I looked at them. "You didn't mourn long for a son you said you loved so dearly." I moved back as the rage only grew. I couldn't just walk and see where I ended up. I never tired, so there would be no need to stop, but I couldn't leave. I was tied to them, and despite my anger I needed to see how things ended. The dark part of me. The part that's been claimed by the darkness wanted them to all die at the end. The rest of me wanted to see them happy, to see them live the life I wanted to live. I kneeled back down in front of my mother, resigning myself to watch her. I wanted to learn exactly what she was doing. Page break. I watched as my mother fed Rebecca and Niklas the immortality potion. My fat her killed Rebecca with a quick and painless snap of the neck. It seemed so easy for him to take the life of his only daughter. I watched as Niklas called out to Rebecca once he saw her fall lifeless to the ground. Had that been how he called out to me when I died? I shook my head, ridding myself of the thoughts, knowing it would only fuel my anger. My father inched closer to Niklas and pulled out his blade. He put it to Niklas's throat and slit it open. He wanted Niklas to suffer, I concluded as I watched my brother wither on the floor for minutes until he finally passed on. There was no one to call out for my brother. And for that I felt a small amount of sadness. I kept silent as I waited along with my parents, for something to happen. Minutes passed before Rebecca gasped out for air, quickly followed by Niklas. They both looked terrified as they felt their necks, finding they were perfectly healed. No sign of what had occurred minutes before left. The helper, the young lady my moth had hired to help around the house, was now laying between Rebecca and Niklas. I watched with morbid curiosity as my mother grabbed her wrist and held it to Niklas's mouth while my father did the same for Rebecca. I moved forward as their teeth lengthened in size and sunk into the girl's wrist. Their eyes were covered in back lines and looked to be demonic. What had my mother done? I couldn't witness this mess any longer. So I disappeared. I headed back to the forest and lay in the cool grass looking up at the sky. My mother had gone against the laws of nature, and for that I knew there would be repercussions. She would have to pay for her mistakes, and for her disgrace against nature there would be no escaping punishment. I watched as the nights turned to days, and once I was settled and the fact that my entire family must have been immortal now, I headed back. I walked slowly as I reached what once was my home. I entered startled to see my mother and father arguing. I had never seen this before. It seemed I had arrived at the end of the argument, seeing as my father left the house quickly, unknowingly passing right through me. I no longer mattered to any of them. The bitter thought settled into my mind. I was just of pass importance to the members of this family. My mother broke down crying into her hands as she fell to her knees. I didn't move to comfort her, not because I knew she couldn't, but because it didn't matter to me. I stayed watching as my mother cried, her tears staining her face. My father returned hours later, his clothes stained with blood and the sword in his hands was dripping with the substance. My mother looked at him worried. "You killed Niklas." I stiffened at the thought. Had my father killed his son? Was this what my family had come to? My father shook his head in disgust. "I did not kill the boy, but if we are to make things right again we need to remove the demon part of him. I will not have him continue to be a part of both." I watched as my mother easily nodded. "I'll create a curse." How is it so easy for her to talk about cursing one of her children? I walked out to search for Niklas. What had he done to create such a mess? I walked searching for any indication of where he may be. Finally, I found him with Elijah. Again, they were with Tatia. I would never understand what the appeal of the girl was, she was plain to me. There was nothing special or anything that truly stood out about the girl. I walked closer and I could hear my brother trying to convince her to run. Elijah seemed tense, he must be a part of what my father had done. I watched as the girl disagreed and left my brothers. Nick spoke to Elijah quietly. Whatever they were saying to each other was over Nick. I listened closer and it all finally clicked. He was one of them. He was a demon of the moon. Was it possible? My own brother was the one thing I hated the most. I took a step back and began moving faster than my legs had ever moved. I ran back to my home. Or what was left of it, and I watched it all fall apart before my eyes. My father attacked Niklas and I watched as Niklas called out for help. I shook my head, taking a step back in disbelief as I watched Elijah tie Niklas down. I looked around, none of my siblings were making a move to help him. They stood there and watched. I moved forward and placed a hand on my brother's shoulder, and I felt him shiver again. "I'm sorry," I announced, knowing he couldn't hear me, but he deserved to have someone at his side. I stood at his side, my hand on his shoulder as it all happened. They killed Tatia in front of my brother. They killed the girl he loved in revenge, and it made my stomach sick to see the monsters my family had become. Her last words were quiet, but I heard them. She loved him too. She loved Niklas when no one else had. I stuck close to Niklas once the ritual was done. He seemed different. I could practically see the darkness taking over. He had lost more than just his love, he had lost a part of himself. His family had betrayed him, and for that I felt closer to my brother than I ever had before. I continued to follow him, I was his shadow. As the days passed, I could see my brother getting close to the darkness. There was little humanity left in him anymore. The days passed and I saw it, the small flicker in his eyes where there was nothing left. He confronted my mother and I watched as his hand ripped through her chest and pulled her heart out. I would have been angry, I should have been angrier, but I agreed with what he had done. Niklas moved quickly, informing the rest of my siblings that their mother was dead, but he lied, he told them all Michael had done it. I continued after them as they packed their things and left. This was no longer their home. It would never be home again. I easily followed after them. If I was going to be on the other side for eternity, I might as well be alerted on what happens in the world of my siblings. Page break. I watched as Elijah foolishly fell in love with the look-alike. Niklas didn't really like the girl. I believe it disgusted him how similar she was to Tatia. It was unnerving how much they looked like with each other. I constantly found her doing the same mannerisms as Tatia. The scrunch of the noise, the twirling of the hair. It amazed me that Niklas hadn't grown bothered with her yet. I sighed in annoyance. It had been a little over 500 years, and I still wasn't able to understand how easily I had been forgotten. My name hadn't been uttered in centuries, it seemed to me like I had been nothing to them. My head turned to the door of the kitchen as I heard it open. I watched with a curious eye as Katerina spoke to the vampire Trevor. How was it so easy for her to manipulate people? Had she no conscience? He was so much stronger than she was, yet he fell so easily for her. I sighed in annoyance, this was surely going to create a large problem for my siblings. I kept close to Katerina, watching her move around my siblings. I scoffed whenever she was around Elijah. It seemed she knew exactly what to say and what to do when she was around him. My brother, ever the foolish, fell easily into her trap. I scoffed at the sight. She merely batted her eyelashes and pouted slightly, and she had my brother under her full control. If I didn't know any better, I would say that she had some sort of magical ability. The way she controlled my brothers, that didn't seem human to me. Page break. Time continued on with the same nonsense between my brothers. I truly did feel invisible as I stood here. Of course, I was invisible. But I would have thought that my two brothers would have kept something to remember me by, but it seemed that I was nothing but a distant memory to them. I turned my head as I saw Katerina begin to run. I followed after her in curiosity. She ran into the woods, foolish to think that she could outrun several vampires. I laughed at her attempt to hide. Had Elijah stepped only a few feet forward, he would have spotted her hiding. My feet began to move to follow Elijah when I paused. I was at a crossroads. I could of course do what I have been doing for centuries and go after my brother. I could continue to attempt to be a part of a family that no longer remembered me, or I could move on. I could follow after Katerina and see where it led me. I turned to my brother and it finally began to be clear to me. Why should I care so much about a family filled with people who do not love me? A family of monsters who do not remember who I am. My fingers twitched in anger, and I could feel. I made my decision. I wouldn't stay here continuing to watch over a family that no longer wanted me. I would no longer have any part of them. I walked after Catherine, not bothering to look back at my brothers. I entered the small home after her and followed her into the spare room. I leaned against the wall and watched as she perfectly maneuvered a plan to make herself immortal. Itl. Ed my head as she began to fix the rope to hang herself with. I couldn't help but feel attached to her in some way. Today I had changed as well. Today I had left behind my old family. I could feel all bonds tying me to them severed. They were no longer anything to me, just as I was nothing to them. Page break. I entered the small town of Forks, not knowing exactly what it had been that led me to this town. But whatever it had been strong enough to pull me here. I walked through the town and took in the sights of it all. I stopped once I came to the end of a housing street, but that wasn't what caught my immediate attention. I looked to the human girl that was at the side of the more animalistic breed of vampire. I rolled my eyes. Why was a human stupid enough to hang around their kind? From the way they spoke I knew she has to know what he is, and if she does then that just makes this situation between them worst. Too curious to walk away I followed them into the woods. Was Is girl so willing to die that she would follow such an unstable creature into the wilderness? I walked behind the girl and I shook my head as she seemed to be in such a haze that she wasn't aware how far into the woods she had walked. My stomach grew sick to see how stupid this human girl was being. She was willingly putting herself in danger, and it didn't seem to matter to her at all. I continued. Ed to follow, too curious as to where he was leading her. I stopped just feet behind them as the vampire stopped pulling the human girl to stand in front of him. Bella, I think we need to talk. The vampire said. Her name was Bella. Is this about what happened at my birthday party, Edward? Bella, responded. The look on her face made me sick to my stomach. I was never one to hate humans, but this girl was incredibly weak. If she was going to date this vampire, she had to learn to be stronger. I turned my attention back to the two in front of me and watched with disgust as the vampire ended things with the human girl. Had he really brought her all the way out here to break the girl's heart? You're just not good enough for me. I'm tired of playing human. Edward Said, the look on his face said different. But I knew the girl wasn't smart enough to notice it. I'm not good enough for you? She questioned. For a moment I thought I would see her fight back, but she just seemed to retreat back into herself. I scoffed in annoyance as the girl continued to play the weakling. She might have been human, but that didn't mean she couldn't fight back in some way. I watched as the boy did the cowardly thing and ran off before the girl could even say another word. I rolled my eyes as the girl began to walk after him. She was in too much of a haze to realize it was going to get dark soon. I might be a ghost, but even as a ghost I could see that it was only going to get increasingly colder the later it became. Edward. Her high-pitched yell made me want to tear my ears out. I followed her just to see how far she could actually go. It was around 20 minutes later that I saw that she was too exhausted to keep going. It was eventually the large branch popping out from the ground that caused the problem. She tripped, causing her to fall head first to the ground. I sighed as I could see the blood from her new injury now staining the forest floor. I walked close and kneeled down to her body. Her eyes were closed and her breathing evened out, but she wasn't dead. I whipped my head around at a loud ear-wrenching scream. I looked back down at the body and then to the girl that now stood behind me. She was a ghost. I looked back to the body in front of me, but I couldn't understand as her body was still breathing. I ignored the crying behind me and focused on the body. It seemed that for some reason if this girl died I would be stuck with her on the other side, and that wasn't something I wanted. I couldn't do a lot of magic that would work on humans, but I did have some pull. Seeing as I was quite old and being alone for centuries really gave me time to work on my magic, or at least mess around with it and the simpler spells I could do and have them work in the land of the living. I muttered a warming spell to keep her body warm long enough for someone to find her, but the blood I could do nothing about. I sat down on the ground and watched over her body while she in her ghost form was still crying. I couldn't be sure if it was from the possibility of dying or if it was from the boy that left her. At this moment I didn't want any part of her as her loud crying was getting on my nerves. Over the years I had been able to learn several different tricks about being on the other side, from changing my appearance to making objects move. I had become a true master at being on the other side. I also had become close with several very powerful beings on the other side. It was simple to say that being on the other side and being away from all the ties to my human life had made me stronger. I stood as a large black wolf made its way out of the woods. I felt the overwhelming need to hit him when he nudged her body, only making the wound worse. It seemed the animal came to its senses and he stepped back. I turned to Bella as she yelled again. This time I knew it was in fear. "He can't see us. You need to calm down, he's here to help you," I said, trying my best to keep this girl from further screaming, as it already was getting on the last of my nerves. The wolf shifted into a person as I suspected. My eyes glanced at the trees as another wolf appeared, this Tim. In his mouth were a pair of shorts and a t-shirt. I watched the human change before he kneeled down and picked up the girl. I was relieved when he noticed her injury and became more careful with her. I glanced behind me at the girl. "Come," I ordered, because if she didn't follow her body I don't think she would heal properly. "You're not dead, but you do have to follow after your body." She stood, and I watched as her legs shook as she walked. Her arms hugged her waist and silently she followed after me. I continued to watch as she made her way behind me. We both followed the shifter out of the woods, and as soon as we came in contact with other people the girl was taken away by a man in an officer uniform, a man I assume was most likely the girl's father. I watched as he laid her down in the backseat of the police car. I nodded to the girl and I hopped on the trunk of the car. Being a ghost, getting hurt didn't matter, and riding on the roof or the trunk of the car was something I enjoyed to do. "Sit down," I said to the girl. She watched me for a second before eventually getting on the trunk and sitting down. She wrapped her arms around herself again, something I guessed was probably to help her from falling apart any further. We didn't say a word to one another as we made our way to the hospital. I watched as soon as we pulled up to the hospital there was staff ready to get the girl inside. She followed without me having to tell her to. She was already on her way inside when I pulled her to the side. She was only going to get herself worked up if she continued to watch. "Don't look," I ordered as I pushed her out of the door. She ripped out of my grip and glared at me. "You can't tell me what to do, you're only a kid." I chuckled darkly. A kid? Was she serious? I shoo my eyes and morphed my body to look older. I now surpassed her in age. "Is this better?" I questioned as I glared back at her. I wasn't going to let this girl talk down at me. "I'm much older than you. In fact, I'm a little over 1,000 years old. When I tell you to do something, do it. I'm not someone you want to make angry, especially not in this place. I overpower you, and if you want to get back in your human body you won't get on my bad side." "Understood," I said with a growl. She cowered back in fear and she stepped away from me. I rolled my eyes, but I was just glad that she had calmed and stopped crying at this point. Page break. I rolled my eyes as the girl wouldn't remove herself from her body. "No matter how hard you stare, you're not coming back," I said as I met her eyes as I stood leaned against the wall. I stayed in my morphed form looking older. I knew she felt more comfortable seeing me like this rather than seeing me at the age in which I died. She glared at me before crossing her arms over her chest. She had yet to speak to me the last week since we've been here. I could sense that was going to change today. "Are you always so negative about everything?" she said through gritted teeth. If I knew she wasn't already in a bad mood I would have laughed as she seemed to be trying so hard to be intimidating. I smirked at her. "I'm being realistic, one of us has to. Isn't there anywhere else you can go?" she shouted as she stood up and deepened her glare towards me. "All you do is sit there and make these snide comments about everything. I hate you. You get on all my nerves and you think you're so much better than me because you hold more power. But let's make something clear, you're stuck just like me. Whether you like it or not, you and I are stuck in the same boat. If you're going to continue to pester me about everything I really think you should pack your things and get the hell out of my sight." I chuckled and stood. I clapped my hands together giving her a small round of applause. "That was quite touching. Have you rehearsed that in your head all this time? Have you been waiting for the perfect moment to yell at me? I must say, I didn't think you had it in you." Her glare towards me deepened. "You're an asshole," she said as she went back to sitting in her chair staring at her body. I rolled my eyes at her attitude. Why do you shorten it? I questioned as I had been curious to this since the beginning. She referred to herself as Bella, but she was Isabella. I couldn't wrap my mind around why she would shorten such a beautiful name. Isabella is a fine name. Why would you feel the need to shorten it? She turned to me and I could see the confusion in her eyes. She was right, the only times I had spoken I had made snide remarks about the nurses and her. This was certainly different. I don't like it, being called Isabella doesn't feel right. She responded, turning back to her body. I nodded and walked over to the bed. I too took a seat on the foot of it and looked at her. May I ask what compelled you to willingly be with the one who left you? You may ask all you want, I don't have to answer you. She replied. I sighed as I saw she was beginning to cry. I sighed and walked back to the couch and laid down staring up at the ceiling. Every day for about 2 to 3 hours her father would come in and have a seat on the chair beside her bed. He'd read her the paper, tell her how her friends were doing. He'd encourage her to waken every day. When this happened she cried. It wasn't loud, and if I hadn't been paying attention to her I wouldn't have noticed the tears streaming down her cheeks. If only she knew how lucky she truly was to have someone who cared for her so much. He was the first person to pay me any attention. I heard her whisper. I turned my head to look at her and gave her a questioning look. Attention. She wiped her eyes and stood beginning to pace. I've been in here for a week, and my mother has not come once to see me. My grandmother doesn't even know I'm not in Phoenix anymore. This is the closest I've been to Charlie in my life and I'm a damn ghost. I've always been on my own, and I was honestly okay with that. I don't find anything wrong with being alone, but he chose me. She said, running her hands through her hair. I sat up, becoming intrigued as this had been the first time she really ever talked to me. I watched as the tears continued to pour down her cheeks, staining them as her entire face became red. Normally I would think she was just crying over pity, but I could see the sadness was replaced by anger. I've never been anyone's first choice. I've never been that girl that gets the guy, but when he started talking to me, I was hooked. I liked that someone saw me and found me interesting. At first, being with him made me feel good. I felt wanted for the first time in my life. I was no longer just a burden to my family, but I was what someone wanted. She said. She stopped her pacing and looked me in the eyes. I get it, I must look incredibly stupid to you for falling in love with Edward, but after so long of being ignored, of being on my own, it felt good to be recognized, to be wanted by someone. She slumped against the wall, falling until her knees reached her chest. And now I'm back to where I was before. Forgotten. You should stop feeling so much pity for yourself. I responded, taking in the heated glare she sent me. Do you really think you're forgotten? You have a man who spends hours just sitting here watching you, praying that at any moment you'll wake up. Your mother may not care, and neither might your friends, but as long as your father cares about you, you'll be remembered. That's not something to take lightly. Her head fell and she wrapped her arms around her knees. I sighed as it seemed she had gone back to her pathetic self-loathing. I laid back on the couch, and looked up at the ceiling. I closed my eyes and tried to formulate a plan. The spirits were always in better moods during a full moon, which would mean it would be the only time I would be able to get answers. I had tried leaving before, to let the girl be on her own, but every time I was pulled back. I couldn't get out of the hospital unless she was at my side, which meant for some reason I was bound to her. I of course could speak to the other spirits, but I knew I would have to take the girl with me, and for that I would have to have as much power as I could gather, and I was strongest at the full moon. I knew the solution to all of this was with the spirits, I just had to be careful. Over the past years I didn't spend my time with the good guys on the other side, for I knew that was where the woman I once called a mother spent her time. Whenever I traveled deeper into the spirit world, I spent my time with the darker spirits. The manipulators, cheaters, the true evil creatures of the world, and slowly but surely I gained their trust and I was one of them. No longer being seen as the forgotten Mikkelsen, but one of the strongest spirits that habited the other side. I took in a deep breath. I just needed to know if anyone had heard of what I was going through. From all my time on the other side, I never heard of two spirits sharing the same reality. Which in terms meant spirits when watching the real world could never see other spirits. We all experienced reality different. Which is why I couldn't understand why this girl was now sharing my reality. "What's your name?" she asked as she glanced up at me from her spot on the floor. "You know my name, but I don't have a clue what yours is." I sighed. "Henrik," I replied, only glancing towards her for a second before I returned to my original state. "And last name?" she questioned. I could sense the curiosity in her tone. "I don't stand by my surname any longer," I replied with a serious expression on my face as I looked back to her and caught her eye. "Unlike you, I truly was forgotten. So I stopped connecting myself to the people that I once shared a name with." I saw a wave of sadness flash through her eyes. I shook my head. "Don't ever apologize for something you were never a part of. I told you. I've been here a very long time. The fickle things of the past tend to just disappear." She nodded her head but stood. I watched as she came closer. She turned her back to me and sat against the couch. She leaned her head back on the couch and it lay on my leg. "You're still an asshole," she murmured. I chuckled at her words. "That may be true, but for the time being you're stuck with me." She closed her eyes and took in a deep breath, something I knew was to calm her nerves. "Do you think you'll ever get to live again?" "Hopefully so," I replied. "If you get to live, what are you going to do?" "Try my hardest not to die," she replied with a smirk. I smiled at her words but waited for her real answer. "I don't know. Maybe I'll look for a way to get bloody revenge on the Cullen family. Or I just might do something boring and mundane." I looked at her but said nothing else on the subject. We stayed in silence. I didn't need my hearing or my sight to know she was still with me. Her head was still pressed to the side of my leg, giving me all the notice I need to know that she was still at my side. Page break. "Isabella," I growled in an aggravated tone as the full moon was almost out. "We must leave now." "I'm not going anywhere with you, Rick," Isabella shouted back at me, her eyes glaring at me as she stayed in her chair. I stumbled back and looked her in the eyes with confusion. "What did you just call me?" I demanded as I stared at her. She shrugged and a smirk tugged at her lips. "You know damn well that I don't like being called Isabella, and Bako. Say I know how much you hate for names to be shortened. I shortened yours. As long as you call me Isabella, I'll call you Rick." I chuckled. She truly was clever, but I wasn't going to give in so easily. "Do as you please, Isabella," I replied. I stepped forward so I stood only inches in front of her. "Listen to me very clearly. If you want to get back to the land of the living, you have to come with me. I can't meet with the other spirits if you're here. You really do need to come with me." I watched as she fidgeted from foot to foot. "But I'm not as strong as you. I don't want you to worry about protecting me." I rolled my eyes at her. "Don't be a damsel, Isabella. If you're worried about me having to protect you, then don't get yourself into trouble." I moved forward and met her gaze. "You show no fear. You stand at my side at all times. If you go to stand behind me, it shows weakness. Don't ever let anyone see that weakness in you. Never slump over your shoulders, keep them straight, and don't lower your head. Keep it straight and hold it high. This isn't playtime, Isabella. These spirits can be cruel, but if you show them any emotion, you let them win. Stay silent, your voice may let emotion escape, and we don't want that. I will protect you if I have to, but it's time you learn to protect yourself. It's time you stop playing the role of the damsel in distress. You should learn you don't always need to be saved." She took in a deep breath and nodded. "Fine, Rick, let's do this." I held out my hand to her. "You can't go deeper your first time quickly. It'd be easier if I lead the way and you merely hold on." Isabella took my hand with her shaking one. "Rick," I sighed. "You're not weak, Isabella, so stop acting as if you were." She nodded her head and I took us in deeper. Squeezed her hand tightly as we made our way through. The first time always felt uncomfortable, and for some it could be extremely painful to experience. I looked to my side as I saw Isabella flinch as we made it through. She nodded her head at me and stood up straighter. Well, at least she was following my advice. I released her hand and we began to walk. I made sure to look over at her every few minutes to check she was still at my side. It was easy to get lost in a vast area of nothingness. "Don't speak," I ordered as I morphed my appearance again. I turned to Isabella and she looked over at me surprised. No one takes a boy serious, but a man, that's different. The older I look, the more mature I seem, and in here the stronger you are, the more feared you are. I nodded to Isabella and we began to move again. I felt her put a hand on my arm to keep herself at my side. If anything, it would help other spirits to understand that she was with me. I pulled Isabella to the side as there was a large growl and a spirit came flying towards Isabella and I. We're getting closer to the dark side. I whispered. I didn't know you were a fan of Star Wars. Isabella replied. I raised an eyebrow to her. Her eyes widened. Well, that's sad. She whispered towards me. I led her in deeper, carefully avoiding the more hostile spirits that roamed on this side of the spirit world. Isabella stood at my side. But her hand still clutched onto my arm. It's been a while, I said loudly, announcing my presence to 4 very dangerous spirits watching the mess of other spirits taking in the power the full moon gave them. Well, look who it is. A deep gruff voice said, stepping out of the shadows. Adalwin, what's taken you so long to visit? It feels like ages. I rolled my eyes. Time goes slower for us than others. I highly doubt it felt like ages. I smirked widely. I've been wandering and have found myself in the need to call in that favor. Adalwin motioned off the other men and I tilted my head at this. When had spirits become like mobsters? What's got you asking for help? I nodded towards Isabella. I'm sharing my reality with another. Adalwin looked towards Isabella and I was proud. She met his gaze without flinching away from him. Though by the tightening grip on my arm I knew she wasn't as calm as she seemed. And who is this beauty on your arm? I've never seen you entertain a companion. I glared at him before rolling my eyes. Did you not hear what I said earlier? She's sharing my reality, and I'd like to know why. I happen to know you have connection with the big guys, so I need some answers. I leaned forward and kept Adalwin's gaze as I need to make this part clear. I need to get her back to her body. Adalwin stepped back and gulped. This is a big favor, Henrik. I nodded. I'm well aware of that. Which is why I came to you and not Blandis. If I wanted something small, I would have gone to someone small. You owe me, Adalwin, don't forget that. Stay here, I'll be back as soon as I get something. Adalwin said before he disappeared. I looked down at Isabella. You did well, now just keep it up. She nodded, but I could sense the fear from her. I had spent too much time with her not to know her facial tics, the ones that would give her away every time. I pulled Isabella to the side with me. If we stayed out of sight there wouldn't be any problem. My arm shot out to Isabella's stomach and pushed her back as a bright light passed just where we standing. Rick, what was that? Isabella questioned as she peeked her head forward to get a better look at what was happening. It's dueling. I responded. Here, it's all supernatural creatures. We have an eternity of nothingness, so whenever a full moon comes out, we're all stronger. Dueling is something that happens often. Not many spirits know how to become stronger and they only retain the strength they had when they were alive. This is sort of how spirits show who holds more power, show each other who's boss. I looked over at Isabella and smirked. Why do you think full moons are associated with bad luck? The spirits are growing crazy and that causes the real world balance to tip a little. Isabella smiled widely. I know I should be scared, but this is all really cool. I chuckled lightly. The novelty of it tends to wear down after time. Isabella looked at me, her face was filled with surprise. You used to do this? She hissed as if it were so unbelievable for me to do this. I nodded. I leaned in closer so my lips were only inches away from her ear. I'm one of the best, Isabella. They won't talk to me. Adalwin said from behind Isabella and I. I turned to him and glared. What do you mean? I hissed in absolute anger. What use was he to me if he couldn't help me? They requested you. Adalwin continued. Only you, he said, glancing to Isabella. I turned to look at Isabella, happy to see she looked impassive. Fine. I turned to Isabella. Remember what I told you, and stay right here. I motioned for Adalwin to follow me. You couldn't do this one thing for me, so try to do this for me. I need that girl to be safe. When I come back, there better not be one hair out of place or I'll destroy you. I practically growled and disappeared, going in deeper. This was the place no one entered. I had been here several times, but I tried to stay out of here. These bastards re-evil to the core, and although I had no problem with them, I wasn't Adalwin and I wasn't going to be used for their benefit. I crossed my arms behind back and walked forward. I assume the reason I am here is because the answer to my little question is something Adalwin can't be trusted with. I heard a deep chuckle, but I knew better than to look behind me. There aren't many people we can trust, or you for that matter can trust. Are you completely trusting of Adalwin? I'm trusting him with something very important as we speak. I replied. I rolled my head a bit and decided to get to the point. The girl he's looking after is sharing my reality. I'm sure you know how strange that is, so I'm curious to know what you may know about this. I heard another chuckle. Of course we know, it is why we had you come here. This voice I knew too well, he was practically my mentor for some time. Amadeus. I'm assuming it's more than I thought it was. I replied calmly. What is pulling me to this girl? What has happened that our realities are one? You're in love. Amadeus replied. I scoffed at the idea. I am not in love. Love is for the living and for the weak. Amadeus appeared before me, standing at the same age I was currently at. He titled his head and stared at me for a moment before he continued to speak. Love is for the soul, and that is what we all are, lost souls. She is sharing your reality because whether you choose to acknowledge it or not you care for her. It may not be love as of yet, but it is something. Henrik, you know I would not lie to you, you are the most amusing and entertaining spirit I have ever met. You have a very strong spirit which I have always admired. I have no reason to lie to you. I sighed in frustration. Just tell me how I can get her back into her body. I don't wish to hear about this anymore. Amadeus sighed. Very well. It will have to be in the next full moon. You must get her to lay with her body, then you have to force her back. You have to use as much power as you can to give her back to the land of the living. Amadeus looked around for a moment. There may be consequences, some of which you might have to be very careful of. I sighed in annoyance. Just what I needed, more problems. I fear to ask what these consequences may be. You may be pulled with her. This girl may be able to bring you back to life. Amadeus replied as he stared me in the eyes. She's an anchor, if the power is strong enough, she can return you to life. I shook my head at the idea of being alive again. I turned to Amadeus. I'm assuming you want this to happen so that I can set you all free some way. Amadeus chuckled loudly, as did the other voices. No. Here we are kings. If we live again, we lose everything. We're worthless. We have control here. We wouldn't give that up just to eventually die again and have to go through it all over once more. The living may not understand this, but you and I both know that the dead always have the upper hand. We have nothing to lose, and whether the living choose to accept it or not, we hold the control. I won't go back. I can't. To be a weak human again. I'd be crazy to go back. I replied as I ran my hands through my hair. I would never be weak again. Amadeus laughed. Then create something new. You have great power, one to rival my own. You have no real limits. If you don't want to be human, then become something else. Become something the world has never seen before. Not many can morph their appearance, Henrik. You mastered that skill with ease. All you have to do now is master how to change your genes. Become something stronger. You will have our support. There's nothing we enjoy more than going against the natural rules of nature. Think outside the box for this one, Henrik. We'll stand in your corner. We already enjoy the destruction your siblings have created over the years. We'd enjoy to see what you can come up with. I didn't retain the glare that formed on my face. They are no siblings of mine. And you should remember that. I straightened out my shirt and rolled my neck again, something I knew was becoming a habit. I'll be taking my leave now. It was a pleasure to be with you all again. I said the last sentence loud enough to let the other spirits in the shadows hear perfectly. I'm hurt you still feel the need to hide from me, gentlemen. I heard the spirits chuckle at my words and Amadeus smirked. We'll be sad to see you leave, but be sure to do a few evil things just to let us know you haven't gone pure. Killing a few good doers every once in a while should be enough. I nodded my head before I began to leave. I turned back to Amadeus. That is if I decide to leave. I said before I left. I headed back to Isabella. I looked around where she was. As with Adalwin when I left, only to find she wasn't there. I growled out in annoyance and began to search for her. She didn't know how to get back to reality, so I knew she had to be here, but this place was so large I could be searching for years for her. I heard a growl, and taking my chances I headed in that direction. I heard a snarl and saw Adalwin pass me in his wolf form. I headed to where there were several of the other breed of vampires were gathered, growling and snapping at something. My eyes widened as one of them moved, and I saw Isabella's eyes focused on one of them. She had both our hands outstretched before her as if she were holding them back, and I believe she was. There was a shield around her and the vampires tried getting through it trying to kill her. My eye caught that of a blonde man with long hair tied in a ponytail that was being particularly aggressive. Without thinking I used my power and a red beam shot out hitting the vampire in the back. You want to get her, you go through me, I said through gritted teeth. I met Isabella's eyes and I knew she got my signal. She didn't lower her hands, only focused harder. I gritted my teeth as the vampire came soaring for me. I sent out another red beam hitting him the stomach. I did it again and again. The sight of him only making me angrier. I kept going at him until he began to whimper out, we couldn't die again. But that didn't mean we couldn't feel pain. Get the hell out of my face before I make you my bitch, I yelled. I saw him flinch back before he disappeared. I looked to the other vampires that were with him. That goes for you too. If you want to fight then let's do this, but I will be your worst nightmare. I sent out a red beam as it hit their feet and I watched them run off. Henrik, I heard Adalwin behind me. I turned to face him. You've done enough, Adalwin. Consider your debt forgiven. Adalwin moved forward, but the glare on my face had him stepping back. I moved forward and went to walk towards Isabella. Her shield stopped me. You can put it down, Isabella, I said. At her terrified face I sighed. She didn't know how to look me in the eyes. I commanded. She met my eyes and utter terror in her eyes almost had me staggering back. Breathe with me and put your shield down. I stepped forward when it was gone. I held my hand out for her. Let's go. She took my hand, hers trembled in my hold and I sighed. I led us through back to where we once were towards the hospital. We got there just as her father was leaving. I released her hand and went back over to the couch. I laid down as I did usually facing the ceiling. I closed my eyes as the events of the night before played out in my head. Was I really beginning to love her? I looked down as she sat on the floor leaning against the couch like she usually did, only this time she wasn't resting against my leg with the back of her head. This time the side of her head was pressed into my arm. She had her eyes closed. I could see silent tears rolling down her cheeks. Do you want to talk about it? I questioned as I looked at her. They couldn't kill you, I added. She shook her head and the tears fell harder. I knew him, she whispered. He attacked me once before. I looked at her curiously. Care to explain more? She stayed silent and I imagined what she had gone through wasn't something she wished to enjoy. I sat up, resting my feet on the floor. I reached down and pulled her up on the couch. I put my arm around her and let her cry into my shoulder. I morphed back into the form she was most used to seeing. He wanted to play a game, she whispered, sitting back up, wiping the tears from her face. It was when I was with Edward, towards the beginning. His family were all playing a game of baseball, and they took me with them to watch. At one point he showed up. He was the blonde with the ponytail, his name was James. He thought it'd be fun to use me as a challenge. He wanted to see if he could get to me against all the Cullens. And they fell so easily into his game. They took me to Phoenix and he said he had my mom. I couldn't let her die, so I ran. I met him in an old ballet studio I used to attend. He lied. He just wanted me alone. He made me videotape a goodbye. He said he'd leave it for my family to watch. To let them watch as he tortured me. He set up the camera and he began to throw me into the mirrors. He broke my leg, my arm, and once he sensed that Edward was coming closer he bit me. He drank my blood and Edward knocked him off and the venom began to take its course. They sucked the venom out and they killed James, but I didn't. She shook her head, trying to push back all the emotions she was feeling. I could practically see them flashing in her eyes. I didn't think he was going to be there, Rick. He came out of nowhere. I tried to do like you said, but it was like being back in the studio. I nodded. He's just a weakling. I heard her giggle and I turned to look at her. Would you really have made him into your bitch? I chuckled at her words. I could if I wanted to, but being someone's boss isn't something I really want. Rick, Isabella said, turning to face me fully. I turned to her, letting her ask her question. Where did we go? Where did you go? I guess I should probably explain more in detail, I said as I sat up straighter. When someone supernatural dies, they go to what is referred to as the other side. What most spirits trapped her don't know is there are different sectioned realms of the other side. There is the side with all the good witches and creatures. Those supernatural creatures who wish for the world to be filled with good things, rainbows and unicorns. I watched her laugh at my words and I smiled as I saw her smile. I did that. I put that smile on her face. I returned her smile and continued. Then there's where you and I went, this is the dark side. This is where the bad guys are. The ones you cringe about in your thoughts. The people that nightmares are made from. For any ghost that goes to either side, there are 3 realms. Maybe more on the light side, but I never bothered to care enough to check it out. So you technically belong to the dark side? Isabella questioned. The creatures on the light side are more manipulative than you would think. At least in the dark side I know someone is after something when they ask for my assistance. I replied. Do you know where we are right now? The hospital. Isabella said. I could see the confusion from my question. I shook my head. This is reality. When a spirit dies, they all get their own reality. We watch over the same world, but any spirit in reality can never see another spirit. This is the only place a spirit can ever be alone. If you go deeper, you hit the next level, which is the last one most spirits know about. This is sort of a meeting ground. It's larger than you know, and this is where creatures come out to play. When we're here we have free reign of our powers. Vampires can do as they wish, never having to feed. Werewolves can change at will, and witches and warlocks can do as they please. That's what you saw tonight. Where I went, it's where the big guys go. This is a realm where no one really knows how to enter. This is a much smaller place. These are where the oldest spirits stay, these are the strongest. They're also the ones that seem to be all-knowing when it comes to the other side. So you went to them for answers? Isabella questioned. Did you get any? I nodded. I got what I needed. When the next full moon comes around, you'll be back in your body. She nodded her head, but closed her eyes. Okay. Page break. I laid on the couch. Isabella sat with my head in her lap. A position I found that I quite enjoyed, and I had settled that yes, I was falling in love with her. I was falling in love with the weak human I had seen in the woods. I did change my mind about her. It seemed she had taken my advice seriously and had finally stopped seeing herself as the damsel. What did Adalwin owe you for? Isabella asked as she looked down at me. It's nothing important, I responded as I closed my eyes, knowing I had just lied to her. Adalwin was a very important part of my past. It seems important, Isabella insisted. Come on, Rick, I'm curious. I smiled. He was the one who killed me. I responded. I opened my eyes to see her startled face. I died by a wolf attack. A wolf bit into my neck when I was human and cut open my side. It was a very long time ago, and there was nothing anyone could do to defend against the beasts of the moon. So all hope for me was lost. I didn't know it was him who killed me, until I met him in the realm. He was in his wolf form and I just knew it was him. You never forget the person who took your life. We were both pretty new to this spirit thing, so I couldn't attack him, but after years I gained power and some mentoring from one of the big guys and I quickly outranked him. Adalwin began to feel guilty after a bit of time. I had forgotten about him until he swore he owed me for taking his life. He swore that one day he would repay me for having taken my life. I stopped caring about dying. It didn't take too long for me to get accustomed to life as a spirit. Adalwin and I became acquaintances of sort. I had never brought up his debt to me until the full moon. Normally, I'd apologize for bringing this up, but I have a feeling you'd reprimand me for it, so instead I'll change the subject. Isabella replied. I smiled, amused as she seemed to understand how things were with me. Do you ever miss them? You're going to have to be more specific, Isabella. I responded, but I knew who she was talking about. Your former family. She replied. I smiled as she used the word former. After I died I spent a lot of my time watching over them. Watching the things they did, how they acted, how everything just changed. After close to 500 years, I finally realized they were no longer my family. I was no longer their little brother, the boy they knew died and in his place I was left. It didn't take them long to forget me, Isabella. Once you watch everyone you ever loved forget you ever existed, it changes your perspective on them and people in total. I haven't seen any of them in years, I don't miss anything about them. I replied. I shut my eyes as I felt her hands run through my hair. Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if you had lived? Isabella questioned as her fingers combed through my hair. Never dwell on the past, Isabella. Thinking of the what ifs will only make you go insane. I responded, I tried very hard to never think about what could have happened. It's never did anything good. Isabella sighed. You're always so guarded, Rick. It's not something I do purposely, Isabella. After as much time that I spent alone, it's something that comes naturally. I responded. I opened my eyes as the door to the room opened and I stiffened as I saw the pale complexion and the golden eyes. Who is that, Isabella? Carcile. She mumbled. I felt her tense as she looked at the vampire. No. This means they're back. I sat up and watched as the vampire walked around checking her vitals and reading her charts. I looked at Isabella as she tensed and was staring at the door as a rustic-haired vampire came into the room. I didn't need to be told that this was Edward. Rick, Isabella whispered, can we leave? I nodded. I stood and took her hand. I led her out of the room and we began to walk aimlessly through the hospital. Do you wish to talk about it? Isabella shook her head. I'm really angry. She stated, her hand tightening around mine as we walked. You know, once you get back in your human body you'll be able to tell him off. I responded with a smirk as I saw her smile slightly. This is the first time we've been out of that room and really walked around the hospital. Isabella shrugged. It feels weird not to be with my body. It's weird to know that I'm here, but I'm also there. I watched her take in a deep breath and then she relaxed. Do you think he would have left yet? Most likely, this is the time your father comes by. I replied, why do you want to be so far away from him? Do you still love him? I tried very hard not to show my jealousy at the thought of her holding any feelings towards Edward. I don't want to be in there and get angry. Isabella replied. If I get angry, I have to hold that in. How can I yell at him if he can't see me? If I hold any emotion for Edward it would be pure anger. I want nothing more than to let him know I never want to see him again, but I can't. Sitting in there while he's there will only anger me, and I'm tired of being angry. I nodded. Let's go see what kind of problems we can get into. Page break. I laughed as Isabella's head lay in my lap. We were out in the waiting room watching as people bickered with the nurse over the silliest of things. I ran my hand through her hair. It seemed we grew closer as every moment passed. And because the full moon was tomorrow night, we didn't have much time to share. I had yet to confess to her the truth. To let her know that I was indeed in love with her. I knew by the look in her eyes that she felt it too. I just couldn't tell her, not if I knew there was only a chance that I would return with her. I knew telling her I loved her would only hurt her if I couldn't be with her once she returned. But if I were to return, if what Amadeus said was true, I had to also focus on changing myself. There was no way I would return to the world of the living without being able to protect myself. And if I were to return, I want to be stronger than any other creature. I had to be stronger. I wouldn't risk dying all over again at the hands of a creature I couldn't handle. At the moment I had started my transformation but I had yet to tell anyone of it. The last thing I wanted to do was jinx myself. Rick, Isabella's voice broke through my thoughts. She turned to look at me and smiled. What are you thinking so hard about? I smiled in return. Nothing of importance, just got lost in my thoughts, that's all. Isabella stood and I missed the warmth of her on my lap. She held out her hand to me. My dad just came, so Edward must be gone by now. I took her hand and we walked back to the room with her. What will you do when you see Edward again? I questioned with curiosity, wondering if she had put much thought into the idea. Isabella shrugged her shoulders but a smile graced her face as she looked over at me. I really wish I had super strength so that I could hit him without hurting myself. It can go so many ways, but I just want to make it clear to him and everyone else that I do not love him. I want him to know that I don't want to be with him. And maybe, just maybe, I'll take a bat to his head for good measure. I chuckled at her words. I'm sure a bat would do some amount of damage to his oddly perfect face. I smiled as I heard her soft laugh. It really is strange how he has no flaws. It's really uncomfortable now that I think about it. It sort of sickens me to know how perfect he looks. No one should be that perfect. I put my arm around her shoulder. Let's head back and see what we can do for the rest of the night. Isabella smiled. Can you tell me what ancient Rome was like? I smirked. Old, boring, and a work of art. I responded, smiling as she glared at me. I knew she wanted more detail. It's not something you need to describe, it's something you need to see. I could try and describe it to you any way you want, but it'll never truly live up to what it was. I wish I could have been there to see history in the making. Isabella replied with a frown. I smiled at her. History is constantly being made. You're here witnessing it as we speak. She smiled. You're pretty awesome, Rick. She whispered as we entered the room. She stepped out of my hold and walked up to her body. She stayed silent as she watched her own body. I could see the tears form in her eyes, only this time I wasn't quite sure what she was crying over. I stayed silent as I walked over to her and rested my hand on her shoulder. There weren't any words being said, but I knew the silence was helping her. I led her over to the couch and we sat in silence. Page break. I held Isabella's hand in mine as we both prepared for her return. Isabella, I said, looking over at her only to see her eyes filled with tears. She shook her head and wiped the tears from her face as she looked down at her body. I don't want to go back, Rick. What are you talking about? I asked as I turned her around to face me. This is your chance to live again. No one gets this chance, Isabella. I can't do it, she whispered. I can't go without you, Rick. You're my best friend. I don't think I could live without you. Who else will tell me to stop being so weak? Who else will be there for me when I need them? I know I probably seem weak and pathetic to you, Rick, but I mean what I said. I don't want to go back if I know you'll be stuck here. I cupped her chin, forcing her gaze to move from her shoes to look at me. You're not pathetic, you're not weak, you're utterly amazing. There's a small chance I can come back with you. I'm not guaranteeing that I'll be back, but I have to try. Beck. Oz, there's no way I can stay here now that I've met you. Isabella took in a deep breath. You're an asshole, she murmured, making me grin at her words, knowing there was no real meaning behind it. But I fell in love with you despite it. Quote. I laughed and pressed my forehead against her own. I love you, Isabella. Now, get on the bed so I can bring you back to life. I watched her do as I said and get onto the hospital bed. She looked at me with fear. I leaned over her and smiled, caressing her cheek to soothe her worries. The moon will be at its highest in a couple of minutes. It's when I'll be at my strongest. I'll bring you back then. What if you don't come back, Rick? Isabella asked, her voice shaking with fear at the thought. I sighed. Then we'll wait. You'll live your life as best as you can, and when you die, I'll be here waiting for you. Nothing will keep us apart, and I will do whatever it takes to get to you. I will always find you, Isabella. You promise, Rick? Isabella asked, her small hand coming up to cup my cheek. I smiled. Of course. I'll find you, Rick. In case you don't come back, I should say how I feel properly. Isabella said with a small smile, referring to the 3 words she hadn't properly said to me, but I wanted to hear them when we were alive. I shook my head. Don't. You'll say it to me when I come back. But, Isabella began. I leaned in and SSED her, shutting her up before she could argue any longer. I felt her hands go to my hair, tugging me closer. I pressed my hand to her stomach as I felt my power rising. I began to push her down and back into her body. I didn't break from our kiss as I pushed her back to the land of the living. I pushed her harder and smiled as her hold on me tightened. I felt like I was falling. Soon I felt her hold on me loosen and I felt her fall away from me. I tried to move to catch her, to regain my hold on her, but it was no use as I was being pulled away. I gave up. I could find her again, but at this moment I needed to focus. I needed to complete my transformation. I closed my eyes and focused. I did my best to focus, but the tearing in my body made me wince. I shouted as I felt everything inside me changing. It felt worse than dying. Page break. I rubbed my eyes as I finally woke. I looked around and with a groan I realized exactly where I was. Mystic Falls. I knew this place all too well. I sighed as I reached towards the ground and ran my fingers through the dirt. I smirked as I could feel the ground beneath me. I was alive, but I wasn't near Isabella. I stood up quickly. I looked down at myself and was glad to see that I hadn't returned at the age I had died. That would have certainly been awkward. I looked around in frustration, as I knew it was going to be more than difficult to get to Isabella. I began to pace. I needed to find a way back to her. I needed to keep my promise to her. If it was the last thing I ever did, I would find my way back to Isabella. I began to walk, finding my way into town easily. I walked until I came upon a small hotel. I entered and ordered a room. I didn't need to pay the lady, I was far too charming for that. I walked into the bathroom and looked myself in the mirror. I smirked at the red hue around my eyes. It had worked. I focused and my eyes began to glow red. I looked down at my hands and saw the familiar red glow appear. I focused and watched as it changed colors. I was no longer just a warlock. I was stronger, older and immortal. I could no longer die, no one would be able to kill me. I walked out of the room sticking the key into my pocket. I walked into town and made my way into one of the shops. I walked around grabbing everything I liked and I figured would fit me. As I approached the cashier I looked the woman in the eyes. My eyes glowing with the same red hue they had before. I was hoping I could get a very large discount. Let's say free. She smiled widely at me, blushing at my very simple words, but she was caught under the spell of my eyes. Of course, she replied as she began to remove the tags from the clothes and putting them away in bags. I looked out of the shop window and stiffened as I saw Elijah pass by. I tilted my head, my hands shaking as I thought about whether or not I should go after him, but I decided against it. I took my bags and walked out of the shop. I headed back to the hotel and set my bags down in my room. I paced about nervously. I stopped caring for my family long ago, but I was too curious. I had to know what was happening. I knew things had to be happening. I could feel it in my gut, this was too good to pass up. I decided to do the one thing I knew to do. Amadeus. I called out. I turned as I heard his chuckle. He looked transparent to me, no longer like a man as he did before. Well, look at you. It seems I was right, she would bring you back. Amadeus replied. Yes, but it seems I returned to the place I died. I had assumed I would return to the same location as her. I replied. I shook my head. That wasn't what I wanted to speak about. What's Elijah doing here? I know for a fact he hasn't returned to Mystic Falls since the day he departed from this town. Well, it seems the light side has also brought someone back to life. Your mother is alive, Amadeus said. I growled at him. She is not my mother. I responded. What has she come back to do? To kill them all. Every last vampire in existence. She plans to wipe them all out in the next full moon. Amadeus responded. Well, it'll be a pain to see them go. I responded with a shrug of my shoulders. If it didn't concern me, I wouldn't get involved. I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to intervene. Amadeus said with a sigh. If all vampires die, it tips the scale in the living realm. It gives more witches power. And eventually there won't be one evil creature left on the earth. Our side of the realm will overfill and it will be a complete mess. It's something we can't have happen. You're the only one who can truly stop the light side from gaining an advantage here. I'm asking as a large favor, Henrik. I sighed. It would mean having to stay a month here. A month. I promised her I would return to her. And you will. But you would return with every one of your siblings in debt to you. Amadeus replied with a smirk. Did he really think I would be happy about this? I've known you longer than I have anyone else. You should know by now I don't give a shit on what happens to the Michelsons. They are nothing to me. I growled as I threw the table to the ground in anger. My eyes glowing bright, as I stared down Amadeus. You truly are creative, Amadeus said, staring at my eyes. I didn't think you would create something so amazing. I must say I can't wait to see what you do in the future. Particularly with that girl of yours. As to the Michelsons, you have to do this, Henrik. Everything will be worthless if Esther isn't stopped. Do you think that you're going to be okay once your siblings die? The witches will continue to grow stronger, and they'll start killing off all other creatures. Eventually all their efforts will turn to killing you and that girl. If you save them, you're securing the safety of you and that girl. And by the time this is over, you can go back to trying to find her. I don't need to find her. I know where she is, I responded, shaking my head as I knew he was right. I needed to do this. Not for them, but for Isabella. It was critical that I always kept her safe. I just hoped she would wait a bit longer for me. If this isn't over with once the month hits, I'll leave, and what happens to the Michelsons will no longer be any of my concern. Amadeus nodded. I'll have some spies on the light side keep us all updated on what's to happen. We have to wait until the full moon. Or else it won't work. The full moon will be the time when the spirits put their plan into motion. Until then Esther will only come back if you kill her. During the full moon she'll be at her strongest. But also her weakest. All her energy will be going into killing the others. I nodded. Just be sure that this works. I'm putting on hold something very important for this. It'll work, I'm sure of it. Amadeus replied. He nodded his head. Call to me if you need anything else. I didn't reply. I grabbed a vase that was near me and threw it at the wall. I hated the idea of having to wait to see Isabella again. I knew the anger was mainly over the fear of her forgetting me like everyone else had done. If she were to forget me, I knew it would break me. I loved her. I loved her so much the idea of not having her made me sick. Page break. I put on my jacket and headed out. I didn't bother using the new car I had gotten to get where I needed to go. Instead I walked right into the woods. I walked until I heard the crackling of the fire. I leaned against a tree with a smirk on my face as I watched everything to fall into place. Esther arrived first, the two Bennett witches following in her steps as if they were her servants. I tilted my head as they began to light the circle on fire. I watched as Finnick appeared from the woods. His eyes were dazed as he walked forward to meet Esther. Finn, my boy, I'm so glad to see you here, Esther said, her high-pitched voice nailing into my ears. I watched as she walked forward and hugged Finn, leading him into the circle. I need you to stay here for just a minute. I have to get some things started. I don't doubt your siblings will be here at any minute. We have to hurry and get everything prepared before they come. We can't risk having this ruined. I rolled my eyes. Whether she liked it or not, I was going to put a stop to all of this, but I had to wait until she was at her weakest point. I sighed as I watched them continue on with their plans. It seemed Finnick was truly under Esther's spell. It seemed he could never truly accept what he had become and was still our mother's lapdog. It made me sick to know he was still stupidly holding onto a life that no longer existed. If only he knew what awaited him on the other side, he wouldn't be so eager to leave this life behind. I sighed as Cole, Niklas, and Elijah all appeared. It seemed they came as a united front, siblings brought together to stop their mother. How utterly touching this was to watch. My sons, come forward, Esther said, and as Hay stepped forward the flames became brighter. That's just great, we're stuck out here while the favorite son plays sacrificial lamb. Truly, how pathetic you are, Finn, Cole said, and I tilted my head as they continued to speak. Seeing truly how much they had all changed throughout the centuries. I was right all those centuries ago when I left. They are not my family any longer. I doubt they ever were. End this now, mother. Or I'll send you back to hell, mother, Niklas said, and I felt it was finally time to reveal myself. I clapped my hands as I walked out, catching all their attention. Truly, how touching it is to have a reunion again. What has it been, 1,000 years? I looked at them all and a smirk made its way to my face. I'm not surprised I wasn't invited to this reunion. I stopped being a part of this dysfunctional family quite some time ago. I say the last time any of us saw each other was when we were all humans. Henrik, Esther questioned as she made a move to step forward, to get closer to me. I looked for you, she practically whimpered. I rolled my eyes. I know you did, mother. I spat the word as I looked at her. I stayed as far away from you as I possibly could. What are you doing here? Esther questioned, and I could see the emotion of fear light up in her eyes. I think you know very well what I'm here to do, I replied as I stepped closer to the roaring flames. The dark side can't have this, it tips the balance too much. Did you really think you would get the upper hand? I hadn't realized how utterly pathetic you had become while you were on the other side. Truly, you're a disgrace. Do not talk to your mother like that, Esther yelled, and I growled, my eyes glowing red, and I watched her take a step back. You are no family to me. You hold no importance to me, I yelled. I looked to the rest of them. None of you do. I'm really just here as a favor to Amadeus. You've heard of him, haven't you? I questioned as I looked back at Esther. She had the good sense to step back, and to look fearful for what was to come next. You can't do this to me, she screeched, the noise of her yells only making the need to kill her stronger. I walked into the circle and smirked as Finnick charged at me. I grabbed him by the throat and I could see my eyes glowing in the reflection of his eyes. How utterly stupid of you. Do you really think you're stronger than me? You're pathetic, I said as I flung him out of the circle, his body hitting a tree. I looked to my mother and pointed at her. Before I kill you, why don't you make something clear to your boss? I said as I stepped forward. I grabbed her by the throat just as she was about to leave the circle. I want you to tell them that I'm stronger. I'm smarter. I will wreak havoc on every WIT TCH bloodline for the rest of eternity if they don't leave me alone. I will kill every witch in existence. I will make the light side useless, and in time the dark will hold all the power. If they try something against me, I'll tear everything they've ever worked for apart. I'm much more powerful than I look, and that is not something you should take lightly. I looked over at the four of them as they stood looking at me horrified. I twisted my wrist slightly and snapped her neck. I threw her body into the fire, just as a precaution. I didn't need her coming back in the future. That was the last thing I ever needed. I killed down the fire, and with the simple wave of my hand I removed the linking spell from them. I walked over to the witch house. For a side that prides themselves on magic, it was awfully easy to take off that linking spell. I said to the house, knowing the witch spirits would hear me. I growled out as I could feel their magic trying to work against me. I sighed, throwing my hands into the air. Fine, I yelled into the house, hearing the 2 heartbeats in the basement. I guess I just have to make this messy, I replied as I stepped out of the house. I set it on fire with my gifts and leaned against a tree, watching as it burned and hearing the screams from inside. Now the house had 2 more wits to add to the list of deaths on this plot. Take another step and I'll kill you, I hissed lowly as I could sense Niklas, Elijah, Cole and Finnick stepping closer. I finished my end of the deal, which was to kill Esther. I have no problem killing the 4 of you. FIV. If Rebecca decides to make an appearance. Henri, Elijah whispered. I turned around and I felt my eyes light up with anger. The red light appeared in my hands and it shot out, wrapping around Elijah H's throat as it pulled him into the air. I'm assuming it's time to make some very important things clear, I said with a growl as I slammed Elijah into the ground. I am not your brother, I said, glaring at the 4 of them. I renounced the Mikkelsen name long ago. I stepped forward, making sure they all got a good look at my eyes. I smirked as I could practically feel the fear radiating off of them. I am not a warlock or a vampire or anything you've ever seen before. I'm something new, stronger, and by far more powerful than you. There is nothing that can kill me, I made sure of it. You are not immortal, I am. I can kill you all in the blink of an eye, and I will if you ever come near me again. Do not think that I saved your lives because I feel something for any of you. I did this because it was a favor to a friend, not because I actually care if you live or die. I'd be happy if I never see any of you again in my existence. Do not think of me as your brother, because I haven't been anything to you since the day I died, and that shall be the way it will stay. Do not call me anything but my proper name. Do not associate yourself with me. I want nothing to do with you. I tend my jacket and wiped off some dirt of my shoulder. I'll be leaving now. Be sure to heed this as a warning. I won't hesitate to kill you next time, I said as I disappeared back into the woods. I could still hear the faint screams of pain from the house. I was done. I could go find Isabella, and turn her into my equal, and then together we can extract some sort of revenge against the Cullens. It'd be perfect. Page break. Getting to Isabella had been longer than I expected. I had taken another month to get ready. By this I mean that I had taken extra measures to take care of Isabella, though I wouldn't let her know that. I had made some investments, both illegal and legal. I bought a car, but most importantly I bought a house in Forks. I knew there was going to be no way I could ever get Isabella to leave Forks until she finished school, so I would stay there with her. I drove up to her home and parked outside. I had bought an Aston Martin ONE77 after Isabella once mentioned she enjoyed the speed of cars. It had been something she had grown accustomed to while with that awful vampire. I listened in before tilting my head, not catching any heartbeats inside the house. It was last day of school before the beginning of her Christmas break, so I knew she had to be here somewhere. I drove away, heading back to my small house. I wanted to fit in, not stand out in this town, so getting a normal-sized house had been the best option. I parked my car inside before walking back to Isabella's house, standing in the shadows the trees provided me. "Okay, Rex," I heard her voice as she came into view. She was looking down at large dog, petting his head. "We're almost home, I'll get you some water." She smiled as the dog continued to walk at her side. She stopped as it walked in front of her, guarding her, and looked my way. He snarled, baring his teeth and barking. Isabella sighed. "Go away, Edward," she yelled in a whisper form as she stared where I was in the woods. I watched her march off. She headed inside the house and slammed the door shut. I smirked as I came out of the woods. I walked up to the house knowing she was alone aside from the dog. I knocked on the door and stepped back. A large smile formed on my face as I could already hear the line of swearing coming from her mouth. I said go away. She shouted as she opened the door. If that's what you want. I sighed as I turned around walking slowly towards the steps. Rick? She questioned as she stepped out of the house. She turned and shushed her dog before she made her way towards me. She smiled as our eyes met. It's really you. She stepped closer to me and she lifted her arms, something I thought meant she was going to hug me. Instead she pulled back her fist and hit me in the arm. What was that for? I questioned, but I couldn't help the smile on my face. Isabella shrugged. I was angry. I've been waiting for you. She moved closer and put her arms around me. Her head rested against my chest and I smiled at her warmth as I put my arms around her in a need to keep her close. I thought you stayed behind. She whispered. I felt her laughter against my chest. Do you know all the stupid things I tried in order to see if you were stuck on the other side? I laughed. I could only imagine Bella trying to talk to me through a Ouija board. I can imagine. I kissed the top of her head. I am sorry it took me so long to get to you. Isabella, some things came up that couldn't be put on hold. I felt her shake her head against my chest. I don't care, I'm just glad you came. I missed you. No one else made mean comments about everything. Everyone was boring and couldn't keep up a conversation with me anymore. I'm glad to hear that no one can live up to me. I replied with a smile as I heard her soft laughter. Here, come inside. The neighbors are nosy, Isabella said as she pulled me inside the house. She pointed to her dog, giving him some sort of silent command before she led me up the stairs into her room. She closed the door behind us as we entered and locked it. She moved quickly and wrapped her arms around my waist. I put my arms around her and kissed her head. I can't believe you're real. She whispered into my chest as her arms squeezed around me tighter, something I guessed was to help her realize I was really there with her. She rested her chin on my chest as she moved to look up at me. I'm really glad you came, Rick. I smiled. I made a promise, I couldn't back out on my word. Isabella laughed. You're an asshole, though it took you forever to get here. I really was going out of my mind. Do you know how hard it is to convince someone you don't love them anymore because you love someone else? Are you trying to tell me that you're in love with someone else? I teased as I moved slightly to avoid the punch she attempted. No, you idiot, I'm in love with you, Isabella said. She pulled back and frowned as she noticed my smirk. I love you, Rick. I smiled. I eached forward and put my hands on her hips and pulled her back closer to me. I love you, Isabella. I replied. I leaned down, closing the distance between us and attaching our lips together. I pulled her as close to me as I possibly could, feeling her arms wrap around me. She was it. There was nothing like her, and I knew as we kissed that there was no way that I could ever live without her. Page break. I smiled as Isabella rested her legs on my lap and was curled around me. Her father had a double shift and wouldn't be home any moment soon, so I was free to be here with her. Isabella had insisted that we watch a horror movie. Something even at the hospital she had insisted on trying to find somewhere that was playing one. Now, as I had finally relented and allowed her to put on a horror movie, I didn't understand why she liked it so much. Most of the time she covered her eyes or diverted her attention away from the screen. I leaned over and removed her hand from her eyes. You insisted on watching this, so watch it, I said as I kept her hands down. Don't be an asshole, Rick, she whispered before looking around the house. She whistled and her dog Rex came running into the living room. She petted his head as he sat at the foot of the couch. He's an old police dog, Isabella said as she petted him. His original owner died in Seattle. There's been a lot of crime there lately, and they were going to put him to sleep. Rex isn't trusting of anyone, but when I went to the pound to pick out a dog, he and I sort of just clicked. I was the only one he allowed to pet him, so they let me adopt him. My dad was so happy. He says Rex is the perfect guard dog. Charlie especially likes him because Rex really hates Edward. Tried to take a bite out of him at one point when Edward tried to sneak into my window like he used to. I growled and I felt my eyes begin to glow at the thought of that boy near Isabella. I turned to look at Isabella as she climbed onto my lap. Her fingers reached forward and ran under my eyes. Whoa, She whispered, a beautiful smile creeping onto her face. How are you doing this? She questioned. I may have created an entirely new species when I came back to life. I responded. I smiled as her smile only grew larger. No, there would be no scaring her away. I'm much stronger than any other creature and there is no way to kill me. You hold the same super abilities as vampires? Isabella questioned curiously. I nodded. I reached over and paused the movie knowing this was only her way to avoid watching it. I hold the same abilities as them, but mine are more fine-tuned. Unlike other creatures, there aren't consequences to me. I do not burn in the sunlight, I do not have to undergo a painful transition, and there are no limitations to what I can do. Isabella tilted her head. Why are there no limitations? Because unlike all other creatures, I have the support of the spirits. The dark spirits enjoy that I return to the living, it's a very large advantage for them. Keeping me alive and free is very important, they would never allow any constrictions to be put on me. I replied. I tangled my hand in Isabella's hair before bringing her face down until our lips met again. I wrapped my arm around her and kept her close to me. We pulled apart as Rex would not stop barking as there was a knock on the door. Isabella climbed off my lap and headed towards the door. I followed behind her, but as she reached to open the door I pushed her behind me, having caught the scent of vampire. Isabella straightened her shoulders and nodded no. Edging that she wouldn't answer the door. She pulled the dog away from the door and I opened it. I smirked as the boy's eyes widened in seeing me there. May I help you? I questioned. I could feel him trying to enter my mind. I'm here to speak to Bella. He responded with a very confused face. Who are you? Why are you here? I'm Isabella's better half. I taunted, seeing his eyes grow with anger. I'm assuming you're Edward. And if you are, then you know very well that Isabella wants nothing to do with you. I suggest you get off her porch before I make you. I heard Isabella head back into the living room as she grew bored. I knew Edward heard her return as well. See, nothing to do with you. Now, I'm going to return and finish watching this film with her, and you will get off her porch. And get as far away from her as you can. If you don't, I'll rip you to shreds and set you on fire. I let my eyes glow and allowed him to feel the power radiating off of me. He gasped back and then crouched down and growled. Get away from her. I had to admit his growl was pathetic, and so was what I supposed was meant to be a threat. I grabbed him by the throat as he attempted to charge at me. Do not make me repeat myself. Get off her porch before I tear you apart. I threw him towards the road. I could see the pavement crumble under the floor. Come near her again without her permission and you'll be dead. I slammed the door and walked back to the living room. I returned to my original seat and smiled as Isabella immediately moved to curl up at my side. I laughed as she flinched as something unexpected popped onto the screen. Why did you choose this movie if you knew it was going to scare you? Isabella rolled her eyes at me. If it didn't scare me, then it wouldn't be worth watching. She turned her head back to the movie and rested her head on my shoulder. I laughed every time she would flinch, and every time she would hit me for laughing at her. Eventually she fell asleep on my shoulder. I picked her up slowly and carried her to her room, her dog few feet behind me. I set her down on her bed and covered her in her blankets. I pointed to the dog. Protect her, I commanded. He barked, and I rolled me eyes as I acted as if this dog could truly understand me. I grabbed a notepad from her desk and scribbled down my address along with my number. I set it down beside her. I kissed her forehead before jumping out her window, being sure to close it behind me. I walked back to my home smirking as I could feel the foolish boy following after me. I walked towards the front door and pulled out my keys. You know, it's very foolish to follow someone that can kill you instantly. I said loudly, knowing he would hear me. What did you expect? That you would catch me off guard and that you would be able to defeat me? I turned and looked at him as I saw him approach. Are you jealous? Is that what this is? You're jealous that Isabella has moved on from you? That you're so pathetic you're not what she wants anymore? I laughed and walked closer to him, twirling the keys in my hand. She could never love you. He yelled, baring his teeth to me as if that were meant to be intimidating. I chuckled. Oh, but you're wrong. Despite my many negative qualities, she does love me. I walked closer and smiled. I could see him recoil from the look in my eyes. No doubt that my eyes were glowing. Really, I don't have an idea how she could fall in love with me, but I was lucky that she did. I just won't be as stupid as you and let her go. Truly, that was the worst mistake of your pathetic existence. The red light beamed out of my hands and wrapped around his throat. You have no chance against me. I will rip you apart and will make you beg for mercy. I tightened the hold on his throat and stepped closer. I lifted him up and pushed him against a tree. I'm here to be with Isabella, so I don't really want anything to do with you, but I will do whatever it takes to make sure she's happy. If she says she doesn't want you near her, I'll do whatever it takes to keep you away. This including killing you. His pathetic growl filled the air. She's just using you to make me jealous. He yelled. And I growled in return. I'd watch what you say, I growled as my hold on him tightened, the red beam seeping into his skin. I moved another beam to keep him from shouting. The last thing I needed was the cops surrounding me. I smirked as my phone rang. I think that's Isabella. Rick. Her voice said through the phone as soon as I answered. Hello, sweet girl, what can I do for you? I replied, smiling as I could hear her small yawn. Just woke up. Yeah, Isabella replied. The note was in my hand, so I decided to see where you had gone. I decided to head home and change. I replied. I looked back to Edward. I might have ran into a bit of a problem. It seems this ex of yours really is the jealous type. Isabella groaned. Don't tell me he followed you. He did, but he's far weaker than me. So it really wasn't that big of a problem. I replied, tilting my head to look at the pathetic vampire as he struggled against the hold I had him in. I'll finish handling him soon. But I'll be sure to see you at a later time. But my dad is home. Isabella said. I could easily catch the worry in her voice as she spoke. Well then I guess it's time I meet the father properly. I replied. I hung up before she could argue, knowing she would. I looked back towards Edward. I released him and he fell to the ground, grasping his neck. I noticed where I had cracked his skin and by the looks of it the wound wasn't going to heal quickly. I smirked as he tried to growl, only to whimper back in pain. Don't let me see you again, especially not around Isabella, or I won't let you live. I walked towards my house and slammed the door behind me. I could hear his footsteps of retreat as I headed up the stairs. I needed to shower and change before I headed back towards Isabella's house. Page break. I parked in front of Isabella's house and I smiled as I could already hear the fast pace of her heart. It was almost beating out of her chest. I knew she cared for her father, and although I didn't care about what others thought about me, I was determined to win this man's approval for the sake of making Isabella happy. I straightened out my shirt and walked towards the front door. Isabella was upstairs but her father was in the living room, so I knew he would be the one to open the door. I knocked and stepped back. I glanced down at the bag in my hand as I had taken it from Isabella's room before I left. Can I help you? Charlie asked as he opened the door, eyeing me suspiciously. You're Chief Swan, correct? I asked, doing my best not to look threatening, something I found oddly hard to do. I am. What can I help you with, son? Charlie said. I glanced over his shoulder for a moment and saw Isabella fidgeting from foot to foot just behind him. I stopped by the high school earlier to pick up my registration papers, and your daughter was kind enough to help me to the office. Only I'm afraid she left her bag behind. It took some time to figure out who I should take it to. But when I went to the station, the young lady there led me here. I wanted to make sure Isabella's bag ended up in the right hands. I said as I handed the bag back to Charlie. Thank you, son. Not many people would care enough to bring this back, Charlie said, as he took the bag from me. If it were me, I'd hope that someone would return something that belonged to me. I replied with a SMALL smile because it seemed to help Charlie relax in my presence. Your parents just moved here? Charlie questioned, something I figured was his officer mode kicking in. No, I live here on my own. They have a very toxic relationship with my family. To be honest, sir, I don't see them as family after everything they've done to me. Forks is a new beginning, I replied as I kept my face straight. I didn't want him to think I was lying. Well, if you need anything, just stop by, Belzer. I will always be happy to help. Charlie replied. I could see Bella beaming with a smile, as I'm assuming she could see that her father was already becoming accepting of me. I'll be sure to do that, sir, I said as I stepped back, signaling my departure. Charlie, son, you have a nice night, Charlie replied as he held out his hand. I never got your name. Quote, Henrik, I replied, taking his offered hand and shaking it. Well, it was nice to meet you, Henrik. I'll be sure to tell Bella you dropped her bag off. I'm sure. She's looking for it upstairs as we speak. Charlie said. At this I saw Isabella quietly run up the stairs. It was a pleasure to meet you as well, Charlie. I said. I smiled as I headed back to my car and got in. It wasn't until I drove away that Charlie closed the door. At this I drove back to my house and parked in the driveway. I got out and began to walk back to Isabella's home. I climbed up the tree beside her window and tapped the window. She opened it quickly, glaring at me for a second before smiling. That was clever, Isabella said as she opened the window wider. He likes you, told me to befriend you. He said something about you being a good kid. Are you serious about the whole school thing? Don't take offense, but I can't really see you doing the whole school thing. It doesn't seem like something you'd want to do. I don't want to do it, I replied. Can I come in? I wanted her permission first. I knew how much she hated her personal space being violated. Of course, Rick, Isabella said, stepping away from the window and allowing me to enter the room. She walked over to her door and locked it. If you don't want to go to school, then why are you? I smiled, because he very human and fragile girl I happen to be in love with insists on going. I know very well you can handle yourself and you don't need me rescuing you from everything, but there are some things you can't handle yet. Yet? Isabella questioned, a smile lighting up her face as she stared at me. Are you trying to tell me something, Rick? Did I forget to mention earlier that what I am, I can make you into the same thing? I want you to be my equal, Isabella, and despite what you may believe, I know you want that too. I also know there are things you wish to do first, and of that I'm okay with. I'll attend high school with you for the purpose of getting under that vampire's skin and to also make sure he doesn't try something very stupid against you. I replied as I stepped closer to her. She tilted her head, something I now realized was her way of thinking things over. You would really make me your equal? Isabella questioned. What if I try to go against you one day? You said you can't be killed. I smiled. I can't and neither will you, but that doesn't mean I won't find a way to lock you up. I'm also well aware that you will never go against me. You love me despite all my horrible flaws. That's unconditional love, Isabella. Isabella rolled her eyes at me but sighed. I don't think you can handle high school, Rick. Maybe you should have just gotten a job as a janitor. I chuckled. They were out. Besides, menial labor is not something I want to do every day for the next few months. Making Edward's life a living hell, that's something I can do every day for the next few months. Isabella laughed. She wrapped her arms around my neck and my arms instantaneously went around her waist. Seeing you every day would really make him angry, she said as she smiled brightly at me. Say next few months will certainly be interesting. Interesting indeed, I replied as I closed the space between us and kissed her. She might have not said it aloud, but she was okay becoming like me, and the thought of having her at my side as my equal for eternity made me happier than I ever thought I could be. Meeting Isabella certainly was the best thing that had ever happened to me. I love you, Isabella. I whispered as I pulled away for a few seconds to allow her to breathe. I pressed our lips together again before she could answer. I didn't need her to say it to know that she loved me. I was hers. I would always be hers. The end. Thanks for watching. Subscribe our channel for more.